Welcome back to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Richard Thompson. Today I'm joined by Murray McCarthy, a preeminent Sunshine Coast buyer's agent, qualified lawyer, and former development manager with a career spanning Brisbane, Sydney, and London. Murray takes us through his path from accounting to law to corporate property and the leap that saw him walk away from a paycheck to build his own buyer's agency. In this episode, you'll learn everything there is to know about buying property and how buyer's agents balance power in a negotiation, and how to back yourself when the path is uncertain. Whether you're eyeing a purchase or own your own business, this one is for you. All right, let's get into it. Murray McCarthy, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Before we dive into all things property, because you are a preeminent buyer's agent on the Sunshine Coast, you grew up in Brisbane, or educated in Brisbane?
Grew up in Ashgrove in Brisbane. Yep, that's correct.
Marist Brothers boy.
Marist Brothers boy.
And how did the path go from there to the sunny coast?
It was a bit of a journey. So I worked in multiple property companies and be it Multiplex, Stockland, Walker Corporation. And so when I was in Sydney working at Stockland, there was an opportunity to be the project director for the Maroochydore City Centre. So I interviewed for that and had the opportunity to come to the Sunshine Coast. So my grandparents lived on the Sunshine Coast. We used to have holiday homes on the Sunshine Coast.
Where did you holiday?
We always used to holiday up at Noosa, and so I was a regular Sunshine Coast person. If anyone ever said to me I'd be living on the Sunshine Coast, I'd just be like, what are you talking about? But here I am, close to 6 years being on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, right. And qualified lawyer too.
Qualified lawyer. So I started off doing a commerce degree and doing accounting, and I suddenly realised when I was sitting in the back of the lecture room.
Who would do that?
Yeah, starting in the back of the lecture room, starting my professional year to be a chartered accountant. I was like, this is so not me. It's so not me. I need to do something else. And then whilst I was working in policy in different areas, I started a law degree and did my law degree whilst I was working. And then because you've got that experience, real life experience, and I did quite well in marks, got honours in law, that I got lots of offers and started as a lawyer, and then became a lawyer in a place called Allen's Arthur Robertson. And again, sitting in that room just going, oh, I don't know if this is for me. And then went in-house for a place called Queensland Cotton, which is Olam at the time. So really quite enjoyed that because it was assistant company secretary, legal counsel. So it was a bit of a quasi type of legal role where you're doing sort of corporate type of work, but sort of legal stuff. And then moved to London for 5 years for Multiplex. So I got the job over there. I always said, I'm just going to be over there for 6 months. Yeah, 6 months, that'll do. And then I got 2 job offers, one from Macquarie Bank and one for Multiplex. And I always loved the property side of things. Mm-hmm. So I took the opportunity to go down the Multiplex path. And that was the opportunity then to sort of move over, because I used to see the guys down the hall, really cool projects at the time that Multiplex was doing, talked to my CEO and transitioned into the development space. Very much sink or swim. Very much sink or swim. They were like, okay, here's London's tallest pure resi tower. You're the development manager now. Go for it. It was pretty much like that.
Wow. It sounded like growing up, you had these pivotal moments, and you probably look back and a bit nonchalant about it. But when you said just then, like, there was something inside of you that was like, this isn't for me. Accounting isn't for me. Being a lawyer isn't for me. But you kept pivoting and kept moving and kept going to the next thing in the hope that you found it. And property seemed to be it. What was it about property that hit home to you that was like, this is where I need to be?
I think it was just like a general affinity. So when I became a development manager at Multiplex, those roles, you're almost like a mini general manager. And by that, I mean, you're looking after the finances of your project. You're dealing with consultants, whether it's planning, whether it's design, whether it's whatever. You're dealing with sales agents from a pricing and sales perspective. You're dealing with the marketing team to get your marketing collateral right. You're then dealing with the lawyers in terms of providing advice, whether that's up front in terms of, getting a joint JV together, purchasing a property, putting into an SPV, or the actual conveyancing at the end. So the whole facet was really quite dynamic, and it was really quite interesting, where every day was different depending on your stage in the life cycle in property. And I really enjoyed that, and I liked the diversity, and And it just resonated so much more for me than like a pure accounting or a legal role. And that's sort of when I went on that property journey.
You could be a general manager for a lot of things, though. Is there anything specific? And obviously, you're still you're a thought leader in property, but is there something about the property piece?
What I love about property is it's tangible.
Tangible, yeah, I was going to say.
And you can point to it. So anytime I go back to London, I look at this residential tower with 3 wind turbines on the top in zone 1, I go, that's my building.
Yeah.
You know, you make a difference.
It's physical.
It's physical.
Yeah.
And I've always had an eye for looking at something and seeing what you can do to it as well. So that it was not just
look at the potential.
Yeah, the potential. And I think as well with property, it's the thrill of the deal. It's the thrill of buying something that you go, oh, that was really happy with that purchase. And so it was all that type of stuff, and just having a general passion for property and understanding property. My father, if he wasn't a pharmacist, would have probably been a property guy.
Yeah, right.
He loved property. So I probably got his gene in there somewhere, and that's what's happened.
And then you got the gig that brought you to the Sunshine Coast for Walker, and that was to help. And that was when South Australian company, I think, JV'd with the Sunshine Coast Council to develop a CBD at Maroochydore. How early are you appointed in that role, in that process?
I was appointed in December 2020, and that was when there was a development management agreement between Walker, Sun Central, and Council. So effectively, Council and Sun Central did the work to acquire the golf club.
Of course, yeah.
And they'd obviously done the work to get the master plan up and running. And they'd obviously done the work on specific super lots that they had sold individually to different developers. And then we were coming in to be the master developer moving forward to look after the remainder of that particular site. So that's when Walkers came in.
What did you learn from that experience?
Very political, very,
not something that you had with multiplex, obviously.
Not to the same level. Like, I think very, very dynamic in terms of everyone, all different parties, different interests. Obviously, a lot of pressure to get it done because, if you're on the Sunshine Coast and you're paying a lot of money and let's just say your rates increase, you want to see that things are moving in the city centre. So there's obviously that pressure, build, where Walker would be saying, okay, well, how can we improve that particular site from not only from a design perspective, but from an efficiency, from a economics perspective as well. So lots of moving parts, and it's such a big project that's got a lot of lenses on it, was a really interesting experience.
And what made you ultimately decide, Muzz, that you didn't want to progress with that and start up your own shop?
I think for me, so whilst I was working in places like Stockland and Walker, I did my own stuff. So whether that was renovations and like really decent high-end stuff. I did apartment developments in Brisbane. So like one was 16 apartments in Taringa, one was 12 apartments in Indooroopilly. And I always thought I'd probably eventually go down that path of working for myself in the development space. You find that, doing that is really hard grind and obviously capital intensive and different things like that. And I sort of, once we did that Indooroopilly one, I think whilst we got a good outcome, very tough dealing with a builder that, has a different goal to what yours is. Obviously you want to maximize value. You want the product to be really good. They want to minimize costs and they want to do it cheaply and as efficiently as possible. So the structure is probably back when you reflect is probably not ideal. You probably want to have some type of JV or incentive or something that it was.
So you're both on the same path.
Yeah, both on the same path for sure. And then I always remember I was like, you know what? If I bought a house in 2014 in the eastern suburbs of Sydney versus what you actually earn, by the time you split business partners and different things, you go, life is so much easier and you earn good money as your principal place. And so that always, I looked at how much work and stuff is required. And I was like, is that the path you want to go down? And for me, I decided not to, did that and continued at Walker. And then you reach the stage of your life where you suddenly go, do I want to be a corporate guy forever? Do I want to do I want to just be that institutionalized person where when I grew up as a kid, I was very entrepreneurial. I had a bit of a fire in the belly, and I had 3 sisters, and they always said, Murray, you always at wheeler and dealer. They said, you'd charge me a travelling fee to get lollies up at the corner store, and I'd charge them 10 cents or 20 cents.
Yeah.
And that's how I would get the money to pay for my own lollies.
Lollies.
Right? So there was always that something in me. And at this stage of my life and my age, I went, well, if I don't go out on my own, I could work somewhere else. I could go for a lend lease, I could go for a Mervac, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's no different. And having the opportunity to go out on your own is completely terrifying, and you've got to wean yourself off the monthly paycheck. But for me, the situation the same versus something different, the fear of doing the same thing was greater than the fear of starting a new business. And that's why I thought, well, you know what, let's start a new business and give it a really red hot crack. And because I was talking to a lot of agents all the time, because I was purchasing properties on the Sunshine Coast, and obviously my track record in terms of my background, you get a different type of credibility, I would say, versus other people, and that's what I did. So I set up my own business, and it's just really gone from strength to strength.
I want to just for a moment delve into because I think a lot of people have their monthly paycheck, and then they have a dream of what to do, and it's sort of like there is a moment where you need to let go of one swing and jump to the next.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that period of time where you go all into Murray McCarthy Buyers Agency.
Yeah. So when I very first started, I was sort of in 2 camps really. I was a buyer's agent, but there's also a business called Capture All, which was virtual reality, creating and recreating buildings like a digital twin, effectively, for with a business partner who was an architect. And at the same time, I was doing the buyer's agents. And would I recommend starting 2 new businesses at one time to anyone? No. Would I do it again? No. But it was a good lesson, and I learned a lot in both, and I met a lot of people in both, and I noticed that I couldn't control the Capture All stuff, i.e. myself, because you needed specific people to do it, versus me being in control of the buyer's agent work, and so I knew that the buyer's agent path was the right path because I was in control. I could do the work. I wasn't relying on anyone else, and it was just a matter of going, okay, well, there is no plan B. It's plan A all the way, and rolling your sleeves up, talking to the right people, and constantly putting yourself out there to show your wares, really.
And obviously had an opportunity to be a selling agent as well, but presumably your experience in property in corporate has always been acquisition.
Yeah.
Is that why you stuck with the lane of being a buyer's agent?
I went through the land of buyer's agent because like 6 years, about 3 years ago, it wasn't as common. And I always sort of saw the buyer's agent more as advisory. And that's where I've sort of come from, more corporate, more advisory. And I definitely...
Rather than transactional.
Yeah, rather than transaction and doing the sales. And whilst, if you've got a brief, you have to go out on a Saturday, you don't have to. You might be able to organise times during the week, and it's probably more family friendly being a buyer's agent.
Yeah, sure.
But it's definitely harder than being. You can't just suddenly say, "Hi everyone, I've just sold." You put a big sign out the front and say, "I've just sold this property," and you talk to your neighbours and say, "Oh, I've just sold this," and are you considering as selling? It just doesn't work like that. It's a very different relationship based, and my business is very personal referrals rather than Murray McCarthy advertising on Google or SEO. It's very personal. Nuanced, yeah.
Hey guys, just popping in quickly to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, it would mean a lot if you take a second to follow the show, leave a like or review, and share it with a friend. That support genuinely helps us grow and keep bringing you more great conversations every single week. All right. Let's get back into it. All right. Well, get me into the space of what you do, the dark arts of buyers agencies. Why? Talk to me about the clients that you like to represent and what you've learned through the last few years because you have been going strength to strength. It's going absolutely gangbusters. So what do you do and what sets you apart, Mus?
Yeah. So I think I'm quite rare where I source both residential and commercial properties. Not too many people do that. And the reason I do that is because of my background, again. And we very much focus on people that are either time poor, interstate, don't like dealing in that real estate agent space, looking at properties and doing everything like that. So we provide that solution of sourcing properties, and that can be off market, on market, pre-market. We then look at do an inspection. The first thing I will do is say, okay, well, what are the pros and cons of this property? Look at the comparables to say, okay, let's provide data. Nothing beats data. And to say, okay, well, for 1.5 million, you've got this one, sold in the last 3 to 4 months. I think it's a good buy. Let's consider putting in an offer. And then the negotiation is sort of really important. I find a buyer's agent's really quite good with selling agents, because you're kind of collaborating together.
Mm.
Like, you kind of go, okay, well, where do we need to be? You can have frank conversations, because they know that a buyer's agent client 9 times out of 10 is very qualified. They're very ready to go.
Yep.
They know that the transaction will happen. There's
no tire kickers.
There's no tire kickers,
Yeah.
right? And so that's why it works quite well. And then we organise the lawyers, we organise the building and pest people. We make sure that, any inspections, like I just came from a building and pest literally just then, and it's being there, understanding if any adjustments need to be done to the price or for rectification. And because you're living and breathing this stuff all day, every day, you're not like someone who buys a home once every 5 years or once every 10 years, where it's not as just in your DNA. That we do this every day, and so we know what you can ask for, what you can't ask for. It's a whole gamut of things that we provide. And some people go, well, why? I've got to pay a fee. And I say, you're going to pay a fee, but if you look at that fee in the overall transaction, and if we negotiate well and everything's being done for you, it's actually money very, very well spent if you've got the right buyer's agent to do the service and to get you a good deal.
It's an interesting environment, I find, because obviously now in these day and ages, it's often $1 million plus decision.
Yeah.
And you're up against, as a buyer by yourself, you're up against a selling agent whose interest is getting it sold for as highest price possible.
Yeah.
And so it's a bizarre thing that people would go into that unrepresented.
Well, overseas, it's absolutely common, in the US and in the UK, where you now have that buyer's agent. And it is very bizarre in Australia, where if you had the scales are very much tipped in the seller's favour, because they've got an expert acting for them, or should be acting for them. So having a buyer's agent on your site really balances out those scales, and I think is going to become even more common from now and into the future. I've got no doubt about that.
How do you deal with the power dynamic? Because often in transactions, the person that has the money has the power, but with the seller, they've got the asset, and then it just depends, I guess. How do you manage that power dynamic in terms of to understand how much, where they sit, where your client as the buyer sits relative to getting the deal done?
I think it comes down to the power dynamic is very determinant on the budget. If you're sort of playing in, say, the $800 to $1 million space or that type of space, it's a lot trickier to try to get some, amazing deal or anything like that. If you're playing in the $6 million, $5 million space, there's obviously a lot more opportunities to negotiate. There's a lot more opportunities to demand certain things are rectified and different things like that. And at the same time as well, power comes down to the willingness. Who's the one who, does the seller need to sell? Are they a motivated seller? Or are they an opportunistic seller where they just, well, that's the price, it is what it is. Versus my buyer, again, they might be an opportunistic buyer. They might be someone who needs to buy because they're moving up from Sydney because they're about to start a new job in 2 weeks. They have to buy something. So there's so many variables in relation to that it's, you've got to unpack the personal circumstances of both parties.
And it's, in terms of portfolio, there's a number of I appreciate a number of different categories, but broadly it's property or shares, and the share price is the share price. You can determine whether or not that's overinflated or not relative to the earnings or the EBITDA of a company. But for property, how do you assess whether or not the market value, as a definition broadly, is what a seller will sell and a buyer will buy?
Yeah.
But if you're the only buyer, or if it's an off-market or a pre-market, or you are the only person interested in this property, how do you determine whether or not what the number is being offered is true fair market value?
It comes back to data, really, and software that's out there. You've got CoreLogic, you've got different price find, you've got different things where...
But it's not they're not apples for apples.
They're not apples for apples, but that's where a good buyer's agent comes in, because you can suddenly say, right, well, that one over there has a pool. Okay, this one doesn't have a pool. This one's 600 square meters. That one's 700 square meters. That one's 4 bedrooms. This is 3 bedrooms. There's always nuances. And then you start to balance it out and factor that in and apply either a premium or a discount to those type of things that I just mentioned. And it is more of a bit of an art form rather than pure science. Like, obviously science from a number perspective, but you've still got to have a good understanding of what things are worth based on different variables.
How do you get the emotional side of it as well? Because the federal government's tried their best to quash the industry, the property market generally more recently, but a history lesson in property since the 80s is that it doubles in value every 8 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. The general consensus for me, I think, is that people to be emotionally in charge enough to say, yes, let's buy, is they just want to know it's a good enough deal.
Yeah,
they don't expect to get 20% off market, the recommended retail price.
Yes.
It's not a Black Friday sale, but they don't want to feel ripped off.
Without a doubt, and it comes down to their purpose. Is it a principal place? Are they living
there?
Well,
let's talk about that. How is that any different? How does that change for you when the client wants it as a principal place or a PPR versus an investment?
So if it's a principal place, certain characteristics would be specifically required for their own personal needs. They might need a media room for the kids to watch the TV. They might want the pool for that same reason. There's certain characteristics, and they love the street. It's close to the school where the kids are going, and they want that house. Okay.
How do you manage that?
So I've had that quite a few times where I say the data is X. If they're not accepting that and they want more, I can't tell you to buy that because it's actually outside the parameters. Just letting you know that. If I was you, I'd probably just walk away. Let's just walk away. There's always another deal, and let's just see what happens. I've had that numerous times.
So clients would say, it ticks every other box apart from the price, so we're going for it.
Yeah, and sometimes they put in a price, and I say,
it's overs.
It's overs. You're paying overs, just so you know, but sometimes they're okay with that.
What has that taught you with respect to PPR purchases?
It is a motive, and I'm there to at least tell them, hey, this is a situation, and you can only lead a horse to water, and they can make their own informed decision. It's as long as you're giving them information that they can process, and it's up to them to make the decision. If it's an investment property, different story. Like, okay, it doesn't hit your 4% gross rental return, so no, move on. No, like I did an inspection before the building pest this morning, and I thought that was the house that had a strong chance of us looking at it, and I looked at it, and whilst the numbers would hit, the location was fine. The actual quality of the build inside, it was a bit more do it yourself. So for the premium that they were sort of suggesting in the asking price, I was like, no. I said, it doesn't cut the mustard for a smaller block, but a nicer home in the pictures it wasn't in fact as nice a home in real life. So therefore it's easier for me to say, no, that's out. Let's move on.
You have a client that comes to you and says, I have a war chest of X dollars. Should I go resi or commercial? What's your advice?
My first question is, well, what have you got now? So do you have any resi now? And I think...
let's say it's first investment.
First investment, I would buy your house first. I'd buy your first house first. Oh, as in post the PPR?
Yeah, post PPR.
Post PPR, I would say, what's your budget? And the reason I say, well, what's your budget would impact my decision, because what you find is that your best growth that I find personally is for freehold, for commercial rather than strata. So if they had a budget of say, 1 to 1.5, I'd say, look, I'd probably go
for a standalone commercial
yeah,
building.
yeah. So if it was like the lower end for commercial, I would, and if they wanted to buy something, I'd probably suggest resi, just because you get a better quality product and your capital growth. If it's in a good area, you'll do quite well. If you had say 2 million plus or something, I'd say, okay, well, certainly commercial something to consider, and you can do well if you buy in the right area. But if you have a lens to roll up your sleeves to do a bit of a value add component.
What's your take on someone who's all in on the property market and they keep leveraging hard? Is that you think, I'm not that you're giving financial advice, but that's obviously with certainly with prices and going up as they have been, there's a lot of equity out there in held properties.
Yeah.
View on leveraging?
My view on leveraging is about your ability to, what your cash flow is and your ability to pay the debt. So if you're on some fabulous job and you've got a big income, let's just say you own a business or a surgeon or something where you just got big cash that's coming through and you can service, no problem. You just don't want to ever be in a position where you over leverage or you're in a type of role where it has peaks and troughs or there's risks to your cash flow. That's when you've got to be careful.
And what's your take on the budget generally, Muzz? Like, how has that impacted you as a buyer's agent, and what have you seen? I know commercial, it's across the East Coast.
Yep.
But more locally, what have you seen?
Initially, I thought, oh my God, I'll be battening down the hatches, and there's a significant change in terms of the negative gearing component and self-managed super, and for some reason, I have never been as busy as what I am right now, literally. And there's obviously a sugar hit component to that, and that is self-managed super funds, people racing to buy something before the 10th of August. So there's no doubt that that's the case. I think there's always people coming to the Sunshine Coast. So you'll always have the PPRs that will continue and is continuing. I think sometimes because of the investment situation, people might, subject to lending capability and stuff, might chip more money into their principal place because of the tax advantages as a result of that. And at the same time, I've certainly seen an uplift in interest in the commercial space as well, because you don't buy commercial property for negative gearing or anything like that. So that's another thing that I haven't seen any sort of real softening of note at this stage for the prices that we're looking at anyway in the commercial side.
Interesting. What's your take over the next 10 years? Or let's say we've got the Olympics coming up locally. What's your take on the property market?
It's really interesting. I know because I lived in Sydney for 7 years, it is so much softening down there. It is soft. There's no doubt. I feel like the Sunshine Coast to a degree is in a more, or Southeast Queensland to a degree is a little bit more insulated. And sure, there's a softening, but not to the same degree as some other areas. And I think that given the population, projected forecasts, immigration's still high. I think the Sunshine Coast was the first or second most sought after region in terms of people coming. You've got all the infrastructure that's coming in. You've got the train coming in, and then the wave, and you've got all the infrastructure. You've got the Olympic stuff that you're talking about. Infrastructure creates jobs. Infrastructure creates opportunities. You've got a city centre that is growing with offices, which creates businesses, bringing people in, hopefully not just the low-hanging fruit from an existing regional base, but others, hopefully. So it has all the right ingredients, and construction costs are high. So your supply is not keeping up with demand. So if you throw that all in a bucket and you turn it around, to me that says that, there might be times where there's a lull in prices or whatever, but from a long-term perspective, I can only see, just from a logic, economics 101, that it's going to increase.
And I think to tie off on that as well, property's never been a short-term decision of investment. Thanks so much for coming in, man. You are a thought leader in this space, and I think more people need to hear your name and know your services there, because hugely beneficial. Before you go, quick fire questions. What does success mean to you, Murray McCarthy?
Success to me means freedom.
What does happiness mean to you?
Family, being happy, watching your kids grow up, they doing a good job, having good friends around you, and just surrounding yourself with good people.
Love that. What does your normal morning routine look like?
Normal routine is getting up.
What time do you get up?
Well, when I used to do a lot of cycling, so I used to get up at like 4:35 to do that, or go to the gym early. Lately, it's I'm getting a bit slack actually, more around 6:30. Get the kids ready for school. I'll either take them to school or maybe go to the gym in the morning or grab a coffee. Or I always like to write an action list for my day, and I say, well, what am I doing today? What do I have to tick off? I'm sort of a very detailed, organized person. And that's okay. That's the goal. I've got to do this. It's a really good time to reflect in the morning to do that. Away you go.
A piece of advice that you would give to the world with all your experience, what would be the advice be?
I think back yourself. Like I have a lot of people that saw what I did and they probably sniggered, or they probably go, oh, why would he be a buyer's agent, when he's, done this or done that? And that gives me great satisfaction to rub their nose in it, to say, hey, you're still there, I'm here. And so back yourself is really important if you're passionate. But you can't just be passionate. You've got to be resilient, and you've got to work hard, and you make your own luck. And you make your own luck by putting yourself out there. It won't just come to you. You've got to work hard.
Love that. And someone that you think would be a good guest for our show?
There's a gentleman. So I'm the chair of the Flinders Foundation at Matthew Flinders, and there was a gentleman that suggested I take on that role, and he was called John Gannon. And John Gannon was a hugely successful fella, just a great human, and he's just got a great story to tell in terms of what he did in terms of his life, and how successful he is now, and how humble he is. I think he'd be an absolutely fantastic person to speak to.
Beauty. Murray McCarthy, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
That's great.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're eyeing off a property to buy, turn to the person next to you and tell them all about the show. It really means a lot. A huge thank you to Murray for joining us on the show. If you learned something from today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. It really means a lot. Until next time, peace.